Hello everyone and welcome to this week's lecture. This week we're looking at Hamlet in its time. So we're thinking about three different contexts for that time period: politics, religion and gender. It's broadly a historicist reading that I'm doing today, so it thinks about the play in the context of the history of its time, what was going on at the time, what events shaped the play, which people shaped the play and so on. But it also looks at the way in which the play turns round and then shapes its own time in return. So how is the play a historical agent? How is it reflecting on concerns of the time? How is it showing people the world around them in a new and different way? In the context of a Danish court, how is it looking back at an English court and indeed a little bit later at a Scottish court too? So think about the ways that Hamlet is a political agent in its own time as we go through the first section of this lecture. If you look at the first slide on the PowerPoint that accompanies the lecture, we can start thinking about that now. So first of all, I want to introduce you to the Earl of Essex, if you have not met him already in your travels. This is Robert Devereux. He's the second Earl of Essex, and he's the stepson of the Earl of Leicester. Robert Dudley, who's famously supposed to have been Queen Elizabeth's lover, whether he was or not, who can say? He's also the son-in-law of Sir Francis Walsingham, Queen Elizabeth's spymaster, as he's usually referred to. He's a privy councillor. He's a very eminent person indeed. Not only does he have this earldom of Essex, but beyond that, he's an extremely important political agent in his time. And what happens to Essex in the months when Shakespeare is probably working on Hamlet, in the months running up to the production of the play and its reception by the public, is that Essex falls spectacularly from power, and that is to do with his attitude to the monarch. This is really relevant to Hamlet, which is a play about kings, about courts, about politics, and about usurpation, about rebellion. Essex is an enemy of some of the other figures at court who are important at the time. The Secretary of State, who is almost like a kind of modern Prime Minister, Robert Cecil. His family later became Earls of Salisbury, and they're still eminent in British politics today. Essex is their enemy, and they've been wanting to get rid of him for quite some time. So it's annoying for them that he is as successful as he is. It all starts to go wrong for him in the mid-1590s. He's a bit of a war hero, he's quite swish, he's quite young, he's handsome, he's well dressed, as you can see in the miniature of him here. He's a man about town, he's a man about the court. He's one of those flashy rising stars in politics that sometimes do come to a sticky end. But until the 1590s, it's all looking okay, basically. He's in the Queen's favour. He spends a lot of time flirting with her and pretending to be in love with her, which is deeply improbable because she's a great deal older than he is. In 1596, he takes part in a famous raid on a Spanish port, which defeats the Spanish fleet. So this is, remember, the Spanish Armada is 1588. Britain and Spain have had a tense relationship for a very long time. England and Spain have gone to war with each other. So the defeat of the Spanish fleet in 1596 is a massive coup. It makes everybody involved in it look absolutely fantastic. So they come swaggering back saying, yes, we've beaten the Spanish. 1598, they're still fighting with the Spanish. There's an attack on the Spanish fleet near the Azores, the islands in the middle of the Atlantic. But here things start to go a little bit wrong. Essex disobeys orders. And when he comes back to England, he goes to the court and gets into a personal row with the Queen in front of other courtiers, in front of people who stood around the monarch's throne. And she reportedly slaps him. Their relationship is highly personal. It's sexualised. There is tension in that relationship that can't quite adequately be explained by the political context that these two people are operating in. It's all, made up. Everything seems to be okay. But in 1599 to 1600, Essex is made the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. This is a very important colonial position. England has effectively colonised Ireland and is running it as a fiefdom, and so a Lord Lieutenant is in place to govern Ireland, and that is our man Essex. He's fighting a figure called the Earl of Tyrone, who is one of the chieftains, who is one of the clans people of Ireland, of Irish history. And he's supposed to be defeating this man, but he doesn't. Instead, he decides to seek a truce with him, which seems rather forward-looking. Looking at contemporary politics, that seems like a really good thing to do. But at the time it was thought not to be. Other commanders were extremely critical of Essex, and he was thought to have given in to these colonial subjects. He deserts his command, it is later said, or it is portrayed in this way, to go back to the Queen unannounced to explain what he's done. He feels that the forces of his enemies are gathering against him and they're going to misrepresent what he's done. So he's rushing back to London when he's not supposed to do so. He's supposed to stay at his post. He breaks into the Queen's bedchamber and he doesn't assault her or anything like that, but she perceives it as an assault on her person. She's worried by this incursion into her private space, into her bedroom. And again, that sexualisation of the relationship between them is important here, I think. She gets very angry with Essex. He's stripped of all his offices. There are a couple of investigations into his behaviour, and he's placed under house arrest. So things are going very badly wrong. Essex's enemies are rubbing their hands. This gets worse and worse through 1600 to 1601, the period when we believe Hamlet is initially being conceived and written. In 1601, he fortifies Essex House on the Strand, so alongside the River Thames there were a lot of big houses that the local nobles had, and they were their London bases. He fortifies his house, Essex House, the massive mansion, and he attempts what appears to be some kind of coup or show of strength. He marches his followers out of Essex House, now fortified as if to withstand some kind of siege, and they march through the streets of London. There were about 300 of them. This looks awfully like an insurrection. Maybe it's just a protest, maybe it's just a parade, maybe it's just a show of strength, but it looks awfully like a rebellion, and that's what it's referred to subsequently as the Essex Rebellion. Essex is tried for treason, and the Queen, his former friend, has him beheaded in the Tower on the 25th of February. So that's the story of the Essex Rebellion. I think you can see some of the ways in which it's going to be relevant to Hamlet. We can see that people in the time thought that drama was a helpful and indeed often quite edgy means of commentating on contemporary politics. And we can see that because one of the things the supporters of the Essex Rebellion did was put on a play, and it was one of Shakespeare's plays. It was intended, it appears, to encourage the people who were revolting against the Queen to think about deposing her, to think through the issues of deposing a monarch. Again, maybe it was just an entertainment. Maybe they just fancied seeing a play about politics, about the usurpation and deposition of a monarch. It doesn't seem very likely, does it? It looks like they're using drama as a way of psyching themselves up to do this act, to get rid of the Queen. And we know this because some of Shakespeare's company, theatre company, the Lord Chamberlain's men, were called in to give evidence about their performance in front of the rebels of the Essex Rebellion. This is what Augustine Phillips has to say. He's one of the king's men. He said that the Essex conspirators spake to some of the players in the presence of this examinant to have the play of the deposing and killing of King Richard II to be played the Saturday next, promising to give them 40 shillings more than their ordinary to play it. So it was put on specially. They paid a lot for the privilege of seeing this play. Much good it did them. Where this examinant and his friends were determined to have played some other play, holding that play of King Richard to be so old and so long out of use as they should have small or no company at it, but at their request this examinant and his friends were content to play it, and had their 40 shillings more than the ordinary for it. So they did pretty well out of it. The Rising, the Essex Rising, happens on the next day. So this is a play that the conspirators see one day, the next day they march through London, they rise against their own monarch. Surely this is something to do with the play of Richard II, and surely it suggests to us some of the ways in which drama in this period is highly politicised. This is like a kind of contemporary mini-series or a particularly edgy drama that is put on the television, is put on a network at a time when it's politically significant. This is a means of people talking about politics in culture and the role of culture in politics. Why is Richard II chosen? Well, in the middle of Richard II, as some of you may know, is a deposition scene, a scene where the reigning monarch, Richard II, gives up his crown to a usurper, to somebody else who claims the throne. A moment of high drama politically and on the stage, when, as you can see from the photograph here, this is from a BBC production called The Hollow Crown, which includes Richard II, when, as you can see, the crown hovers between two individuals. It is handed over, and we know from the words of the characters speak during this scene that this is how this is meant to be played. They speak about each of them having a hand on the crown. Henry Bolingbroke, who will then become Henry IV, says, "Are you content to resign the crown?" He staged this as a public ceremony where his rival and the former king, now about to be the ex-king, Richard, gives up the crown to him. And he has to ask him, "Are you going to do this?" And Richard kind of havers. "I," he says, meaning yes. "No, no, I, for I must nothing be. Therefore, no, no, for I resign to thee." It's a very tricksy little speech. Nobody quite knows which way this is going. "Now mark me how I will undo myself," he says. "I give this heavy weight from off my head, and this unwieldy sceptre from my hand, the pride of kingly sway from out my heart. With mine own tears I wash away my balm, the holy oil with which he's been anointed at his coronation. With mine own hands I give away my crown. With mine own tongue deny my sacred state. With mine own breath release all duty's rights. All pomp and majesty I do forswear. My manners, rents, revenues I forego. My acts, decrees and statutes I deny. God pardon all oaths that are broke to me. God keep all vows unbroke that swear to thee. Long mayst thou live in Richard's seat, the throne, to sit, and soon lie Richard in earthly pit." This king gives away his crown, and this is a wonderful moment for the conspirators, who must have hoped that Elizabeth would go down a similar route, would agree to resign the crown, perhaps to Essex, perhaps to somebody else, another favoured candidate. And Elizabeth knew that this was what was being done, or so it is said, because on 4th of August 1601, several months after the rebellion, she's having a chat to an antiquary called William Lambard. He's a magistrate in Kent, he's a contemporary historian. And she says to him, in the context of discussing Richard II in history, "I am Richard II, know ye not that?" And Lambard is probably a little bit embarrassed by this personal revelation that the Queen is saddened by her relationship, in drama at least, to this former deposed monarch, and that she's asking him, in a way, what he thinks of that relationship. "Am I Richard II?" is she saying? Whose side are you on here? And Lambard talks a little bit about Essex, probably very carefully. Elizabeth mentions the performing of the play of Richard II, and then, sensibly, they move on to other things, and Lambard probably wipes his brow and carries on with his antiquarian activities. The Queen read the play in this way. The Queen read the relationship between drama and reality in this way. She could see that she was supposedly incarnated in this figure on the stage. And when we come on to Hamlet, I want you to think about how the play is relevant to some of these contemporary political issues that Shakespeare and the audience knew about. What do we have here that is similar? We have an ageing, weakened monarch, Elizabeth, and, of course, old Hamlet. We have feuding nobles. We have this chaotic plotting, which could go any way, several potential usurpers. We've got execution as a common method of removing rivals. The political tensions are sexualised. This is a militarised court engaging in foreign wars. There are concerns over corruption, spying, intrigue. And there's a nostalgia for a golden age when none of this was going on. Politics gone horribly wrong. People are trying to take the crown from the Queen. She is not doing as well as she was as a leader. They're looking back to a golden age and thinking times are better then. There are many concerns over the succession after this elderly monarch's death. And of course, all these things apply to Hamlet. So what I'd like you to do at the end of this section of the lecture now is to have a look at the next slide and to read the extract from Hamlet there, and to think about the questions. How is Hamlet a political actor in its own time? How are the political tensions of the time relevant to and expressed within Hamlet?